Welcome to Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, the #1 podcast and resource for Black entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Jay Jones, and Black Entrepreneur Blueprint was created specifically to educate and inspire Black entrepreneurs to launch, build, and grow successful, sustainable businesses. Join us as we help build an economic power base in the worldwide Black community by building and supporting Black-owned businesses. If you're currently an entrepreneur or want to be an entrepreneur, you're invited to join us each and every week here at Black Entrepreneur Blueprint. Welcome to the BEB family and get ready to elevate your entrepreneur IQ. Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, episode number 574. I'm your host, Jay Jones, and today we have another outstanding and informative show in store for you. Today we're going to be doing a rebroadcast of one of our most downloaded and impactful episodes from June of 2023, titled Beyond the Date, Understanding Juneteenth's Impact on Our Quest for Freedom. Beyond the Date, Understanding Juneteenth's Impact on Our Quest for Freedom. Let's get ready for today's show content. Now, today's show is a little bit different, and I'm going to ask you guys to check it out on YouTube. I'm actually filming this live in my office, and today we're going to talk about Juneteenth because we're celebrating Juneteenth today. Today's show topic is Beyond the Date, Understanding Juneteenth's Impact on the Ongoing Quest for Freedom. Beyond the Date, Understanding Juneteenth's Impact on the Ongoing Quest for Freedom. And the reason I asked you to watch it on the YouTube channel is because I have some accompanying slides and also some video that's going along with this. Now, I know most of you usually listen to it via podcast. You can do that if you're not able to jump onto the YouTube channel. But if you are, go to YouTube, type in Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, and it will be the latest video. Now, before we get into today's content, I just want to share a few things with the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint family. First and foremost, I want to welcome all first-time listeners to Black Entrepreneur Blueprint. Welcome to the BEB family. Please stick around until the end of today's broadcast, and I'm going to share all my social media contact information and resources, such as the link to my latest book, Unlocking the Power of ChatGPT, the Ultimate Prompting Handbook for Beginners. You can go to unlockingchatgpt.com for more information. Also, don't forget, get 3 days free access to bebacademy.com. It's an online learning portal to help you elevate your entrepreneur IQ. Now, all you do is go to the website. You can go to blackentrepreneurblueprint.com. On the first page, you'll see BEB Academy. Hit that button and you'll get 3 days free access to all our online courses, resources, PDFs, and masterclasses designed to help you elevate your entrepreneur IQ. All right, now let's get ready for today's content. Now, today's content is kind of deep. I'm actually presenting this today, June 19th, Juneteenth, at a corporation. It's actually an international corporation that I'm actually going to be doing this presentation for. But it's going to be a little bit different than the one that I'm going to do today. I'm speaking directly to our people. So the message is directly associated with who I'm talking to. Now, at the other company, I'm actually speaking to a Black resource group within a company, but there'll be others that will be there. So let's talk about what we're going to do today. So here's what you guys can expect from today's show. We're always talking about quest for freedom. And Juneteenth was a demarcation point where we got our freedom technically, right? But here's a couple of things we're going to talk about. First, I'm going to discuss the history of Juneteenth. And of course, when you discuss the history of Juneteenth, you have to discuss the history of slavery. And we're going to delve on that briefly. Next, we're going to talk about the landscape. What did it look like for Black folk after the Emancipation Proclamation? Then we're going to go in and talk about the quest for physical freedom. Then we're going to talk about the quest for mental freedom. And lastly, we're going to talk about the quest for economic freedom. And so these are all different types of freedoms that we're trying to achieve. And right now, as we all know, if you're black and you're listening to this, I don't care if you're in the United States, Canada, worldwide, there is a thing called systemic racism. And we're fighting for freedom every day. And so we're going to be discussing that. I want to start off with a quote by Coretta Scott King. She said, "Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and you win it in every generation." Very powerful statement. Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. So now, just because we had the civil rights era back in the 60s, that doesn't mean we have to stop fighting. You guys see what's going on right now in, the worldwide landscape. We have an election coming up in 2024, and there are all types of things that are in motion right now that are designed to keep us in a subservient position. So we're going to have to make sure that we, number one, recognize and understand what's going on. But number two, most importantly, start to mobilize and galvanize and do something about it. So I first want to start off with the history of slavery. So I'm just going to read a little piece from one of my slides. It says, in the 15th century, the Roman Catholic Church divided the world in half, granting Portugal a monopoly on trade in West Africa and Spain the right to colonize the New World in its quest for land and gold. I'm going to skip down a little. It says it granted the right to invade, plunder, and reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. Queen Isabella invested in Christopher Columbus's exploration to increase her wealth and ultimately rejected the enslavement of Native Americans, claiming that they were Spanish subjects. So we're talking back into the 15th century. So Queen Isabella said, you know what? We're not going to enslave the Native Americans because we feel that they're descendants of ours. So let's go to Africa and bring over some people that we can enslave perpetually. Okay. So these are the things that we've been dealing with for over 400 years. Now, fast forward to Juneteenth. What is the history of the holiday of Juneteenth? So on Freedom's Eve, or the eve of January 1st, 1963, the first watch night service took place. And so on that night, enslaved and free African Americans gathered in churches and private homes all across the country, awaiting news that the Emancipation Proclamation had taken in effect. Now, at the stroke of midnight, prayers were answered and an enslaved people in the Confederate states were declared legally free. Union soldiers, many of whom were black, marched onto plantations across cities in the South, reading small copies of the Emancipation and spreading the news of freedom in the Confederate States. Now, so most people who don't dive deep into this think that, okay, January 1st, 1863, slaves were free, no repercussions of what had gone on for hundreds of years prior to that. Now, those people are obviously naive. There's some people that don't recognize it because of ignorance, meaning not knowing, and there are other people that know it happened and willfully ignore it, saying that it doesn't happen. I'm not going to call any names, but, there are a lot of political candidates out there that talk about that nonsense, and more than you probably imagine. So in terms of the Emancipation Proclamation, it says President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation on January 1st, 1863, as the nation approached its third year of the bloody Civil War. Now, the proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are and henceforth shall be free. Now, despite this expansive wording, the Emancipation Proclamation was actually limited in many ways. A lot of people don't know this. It applied only to the states that had seceded from the United States, leaving slavery untouched in the loyal border states. It also expressly exempted parts of the Confederacy, the Southern secessionist states, that had already come under Northern control. Most important, the freedom it promised depended upon Union troops' military victory. Okay, and this is a reference to the National Archives. So a lot of people ask, well, how come in Galveston, Texas, they didn't hear about the emancipation or Juneteenth until 1865. And what happened was it took that long for the Union Army to get and conquer Galveston or in that area in Texas to let the people free. So unlike today where you have instant media, instant communication, until the Union Army was able to come in and tell the people they were free, then they weren't going to be able to know that. So I've got questions before about, well, how come some people didn't leave the farm or the plantation until 1865? And that's the reason. You know, a lot of people talk about Abraham Lincoln, right? Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. It's funny the history that they want you to believe. So my mom always says something. She says, remember the source. And what that means is remember the source of where you're getting the information. But let's let President Abraham Lincoln tell you his thoughts on equality. Then we're going to talk about his thoughts on the emancipation. And this is written in the Press and Tribune, which is a newspaper, on October 15th, 1858. Now, this is a response to one of the columnists that wrote an article. And he said, I am not nor ever have been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. That I am not nor ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermingling with the white people. And I will say in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and black races, which will ever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior. I am as much as any other man in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. This is from the mouth of Abraham Lincoln on his thoughts for equality. Okay, so let's talk about his thoughts on freeing the slaves. This is not my interpretation. These are the words of Abraham Lincoln. Now, although he had already drafted the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln responded with his own open letter to Horace Greeley, who was a columnist, which he published in the National Intelligencer in Washington, D.C. And this is what his thoughts are on freeing the slaves. My paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would do that also. So what he's saying basically is his objective is to free the is to stop the war. That's what his objective is. His objective is to the Union. So when a lot of people, or it's presented that Lincoln, was a man of honor, a man of justice, that's just not so. Not because Jay Jones said it. It's because Abraham Lincoln told you what he felt about equality, what he felt about black folk, and what he felt about the emancipation. So when you hear this nonsense in these classes of any parents have their kids in the car while they're watching this or listening to this, people will tell you exactly what they mean. All you have to do is take a look at the historical data. Don't take my word for it. Go and look at the historical data. Now, let's move on to the landscape for free blacks. This is after the Emancipation Proclamation. And when I say free, I'm doing air quotes around it. Okay? Because what happened, guys, and you have to understand this from an economic perspective, and we're going to get to economics at a later time. But we move from an asset to white people to a liability. And let me explain that. So after emancipation, slaves went from being an asset to whites to become a liability, a competitor for jobs and resources. Okay. An asset is anything that has a current or future economic value to a business. So once the slaves became free, they were now able to compete for work in trades such as millwork, carpentry, ironwork, and also everything else that they did while they were in captivity. And so if you've ever been to Charleston, South Carolina, there's a place called the Battery. And the Battery is right on the waterfront. And there is a ton of amazing ironwork done on a lot of these old mansions. And so these are the type skills that we acquired when we were in slavery. So now, as opposed to being property where the slave owner would loan out their slaves to do work and make money off of it, now these skilled craftsmen were able to compete, supposedly. And we'll get to that. And it's always a but or a caveat. So in 1865, now remember, 1863 was the emancipation for most of the slaves, and it took a little longer for some other slaves to understand or find out that they were free. But in 1865, there was a thing that was called the Black Codes. Okay, now here's what the Black Codes were. And I'm just going to read from a slide here so it gives you a more detailed information or definition. Even as former enslaved people fought to assert their independence and gain economic autonomy during the earliest years of Reconstruction, white landowners acted to control the labor force through a system similar to the one that had existed during slavery. To that end, in late 1865, Mississippi and South Carolina enacted the first Black Codes. Mississippi's law required Black people to have written evidence of employment for the coming year each January. If they left before the end of the contract, they would be forced to forfeit earlier wages and were subject to arrest. Now, in South Carolina, a law prohibited Black people from holding any occupation other than a farmer or servant unless they paid an annual tax of $10 to $100. Now, this provision hit free Black people already living in Charleston and former slaves and artisans especially hard because, once again, you're just coming out of slavery. Do you have $10 or $100, which is probably equivalent in that situation to $1,000 or $10,000, right? So in both states, Black people were given heavy penalties for vagrancy, including forced plantation labor in some cases. So, Black Codes. Reconstruction was coming on. White folk didn't like that, obviously. So let's create a system or some laws or guidelines where we can still control the former assets, which are now liabilities. Now, let's talk about limits on Black freedom, okay? So it says the primary purpose for the Black Codes was to restrict Black people's labor and activity. Some states limited the type of property that Black people could own, while virtually all former Confederate states passed strict vagrancy and labor contract laws, as well as so-called anti-enticement measures designed to punish anyone who offered higher wages to a Black laborer already under contract. You see that with the unions, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Now, also, Black people who broke labor contracts were subject to arrest, beating, and forced labor, and apprenticeship laws forced many minors, and you could be an orphan or whatever, they forced minors into unpaid labor for white plantations, okay? So the Black Codes pretty much were designed to impact our ability to earn money, to make a living, to be out on our own. It was designed basically to put us back into servitude, not quote unquote slavery per se, but damn near the same thing. Let's talk about the impact of the Black Codes. So the restrictive nature of the codes and widespread Black resistance to their enforcement enraged many in the North who argued that the codes violated the fundamental principles of free labor. Okay. Now, after the push for Reconstruction kind of waned after the 1870s. So after the emancipation, you know, the Reconstruction, you had a lot of Black politicians and people in government. But after the early 1870s, undermined by violence of the white supremacist organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan, then that's the reason the Klan came about. They didn't like what was going on with Reconstruction. So discrimination would continue in America with the rise of Jim Crow laws, but would inspire the civil rights movement to come. Okay. Now, on the next slide, when I'm doing this presentation, I actually have a picture of a real Klan hood and also shackles. And these pictures I took personally from the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. So you need to make a point. I don't care if you live in Canada. I don't care if you live in California or wherever. You need to make a point to visit this museum, give yourself 2 days, and also make sure you bring your children or grandchildren with you. Some of the exhibits in the museum, especially the Emmett Till exhibit, literally brought tears to my eyes. Now, you're not able to take pictures in that part of the exhibit, but I'm telling you right now, it's an amazing experience, and you definitely need to make a concerted effort to go to the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. All right, let's talk about enslavement by debt. Okay, so after we're coming out of the emancipation, they still got their foot on our neck. So enslavement by debt. So fees were the easiest way to reinstate servitude, right? So as African Americans earned so little that paying a steep fine was out of the question for most of them. And failure to pay these fines allowed the state to order them to work off their balances. A system called debt peonage, Peonage, debt peonage. Typically, this work was agriculture in nature, just as we had been doing while we were enslaved. This is another way to put you back on the plantation. You get a fine, you can't pay it. Now, guess what? You're back working on a farm. And it's funny because it's kind of like today, too. Say you're driving right now, your finances are jacked up. You get a ticket, don't pay your tickets, your driver's license gets suspended. Now you can't get to work, So in terms of enslavement by debt, so the black codes not only forced African Americans to work for free, but also essentially placed them under surveillance. So their comings, their goings, meetings, church services, they were all monitored by the authorities and local officials. Black people needed passes and white sponsors to move from place to place or to leave town collectively. These regulations codified a permanent underclass status for African Americans. Do you understand that? It created a permanent underclass status from African Americans. And so this is something that we're still fighting about, guys. Remember, shortly we're going to talk about the quest for physical freedom, mental freedom, and economic freedom. But let's talk about systemic racism, and which was born basically from the black codes. Okay. And systemic racism, it's a group effort. But I want you to listen to this carefully. And when somebody says that racism isn't systemic, I want you to listen to this very carefully. And I'm going to read it 2 times. Okay. The mandate of the slave codes was this. The slave codes required all individuals, all churches, all businesses, all organizations, all schools, and all levels of government to teach, justify, and enforce the status of blacks as subordinate, excluded, non-competitive, non-compensated, managed workforce for the personal comfort and wealth building of white society. And if you're watching this video, I'm going to be putting up these slides so you'll be able to see and read this. I'm going to read it one more time. This is what the slave codes required. Listen to who they're requiring this from. From all individuals, all churches, all businesses, all organizations, all schools that our kids go to, and all levels of government, which create policies, to teach, justify, and enforce the status of blacks as subordinate, excluded, non-competitive, non-compensated, managed workforce for what? For the personal comfort and wealth building of white society. So when you say people are on code, white folk are on code, that's what it really means. They're on code. This was mandated by the slave codes. Now, you're talking about institutions of government, institutions of schools, which teach our children, churches. What do they say the most segregated time in America is? 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. Businesses, you wonder why you can't break through the glass ceiling. Individuals, not all individuals, obviously, are racist, but this was mandated. This was the slave codes. And this was our landscape, guys, after we got out of slavery. So just think about it. We were enslaved for hundreds of years. We technically, quote unquote, get out. And now they're mandating with these black codes, slave codes, black codes, same thing, what their game plan is. So when you see these Karens on Instagram, YouTube, or whatever, they're on code. When you see these politicians talking a certain way, they're on code. Ron DeSantis, Trump, all of these politicians, they're following the code. It's been ingrained in this system since the beginning of time. All right. Now let's move on to our quest for physical freedom since the abolishment of slavery. There's always been, if you're black, you know it's a constant struggle to live free, right? So we're going to talk about a couple of things. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, lynchings and hate crimes, redlining, the prison industrial complex, and false accusations against black men and women. Now, the Civil Rights Act of 64 was signed by Lyndon Johnson, and it supposedly ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It's considered one of the crowning legislative achievements of the civil rights movement. Now, it also paved the way for two other follow-up laws, the Voting Rights Act Law of 1965 and the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which banned discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of property. Okay. Now, let's start off. Number one, we're going to talk about, that was Civil Rights Act of 64. Let's talk about lynchings, hate crimes, and how it affects physical freedom. Now, obviously, if hate crimes, you're physically assaulted, obviously lynching, you're killing people, maiming people, that affects our quest for physical freedom. So just listen to this, guys. 200 anti-lynching bills were presented before Congress to outlaw lynching between 1882 and 1967. Now, a revised version of the Emmett Till Lynching Act, Anti-Lynching Act, was introduced in the 117th Congress, and it finally passed the House of Representatives in February 2022 and the Senate in March, and Joe Biden, president, signed March 29th, 2022. There were 200 anti-lynching bills that were presented from 1882 to 1967, and not one of the damn bills got passed until 2022. Now, what type of human would go against an anti-lynching bill? That means that you don't care if people get lynched. No, let me rephrase that. You don't care if black people get lynched. If white people start getting lynched and other ethnicities start getting lynched, that bill would have been passed. Okay. And what we're discussing right now, guys, is our quest for physical freedom. We talked about the Civil Rights Act of 64, lynching and hate crimes. You also have to go back to the destruction of Black Wall Street. My former book, A New Black Wall Street, I wrote about that. Also, you have to look at in terms of, Rosewood. And I think there are over 40 or 50 black towns that have actually been destroyed by white folk. And one of the things that you have to understand is a lot of that stuff, you don't hear or read about it in history. As a matter of fact, in Tulsa, since I did detailed research on this, because obviously I wrote a book on it, it was actually declared by the governor, I believe, the governor of Oklahoma, that they weren't even going to talk about this anymore, and it wasn't to be put in any of the academic books. So just like we're talking right now about critical race theory, which is history, They want to whitewash the history and take away all of the things that they've done. But history is a combination of the good and the bad. And that's why I'm super excited to do today's show. It's a little bit different than the normal show, but these are things that are impactful and important because we're still on that quest for freedom. Okay. So the destruction of Black Wall Street, and we're talking about our physical quest for freedom, redlining and physical freedom. So redlining can be defined as a discriminatory practice that consists of a systematic denial of services such as mortgages, insurance loans, and other financial services to residents of certain areas based on their race and ethnicity. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I have a picture of the book called The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. And what this talks about, and I'll just read it, synopsis, incontrovertibly makes clear that it was planned segregation, the laws and policy decisions passed by local, state, and federal governments that actually promoted the discriminatory patterns that continue today. Check it out, The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. Now, if you go to today's show notes, just go to blackentrepreneurblueprint.com and you'll hit episode number 470. It'll be on the first page of the latest episodes. I'm going to have a link to all of the books and resources that I talk about today. So redlining was another physical impediment for us to being physically free. Next thing I want to talk about is the prison industrial complex. And you saw the beginnings of that right after the emancipation, right? So you saw what happened when they put the black codes in to make people still be under the thumb of the white folk. And that's what's happening today. It's just changed. So now you don't have to worry about walking around with papers or anything like that. Now you have to worry about policies, legal policies and things that are put in place by these politicians. And a side note, anybody who doesn't think they want to vote, I'm going to tell you right now, that's one of the worst mistakes you're ever going to make. Oh, we're going to show our disdain for the system by not voting. That's exactly what they want you to do. You're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Politicians make policies. All right. Presidents, they seat judges. And those judges can determine what cases get thrown out of the local system or what cases are heard in the local system and what the penalty is. So if anything, you better straighten up and start voting at least for your local government. Because when we talk about the prison industrial complex, the district attorney, they're really in control of what cases get prosecuted and what's going to happen. So when you're voting for DA in government and you're locally, that's going to determine, guys, what's going to happen to you or your family member if you get arrested. And you know, the prison industrial complex basically is a profit-driven relationship between the government, the private companies that build, manage, and supply and service prisons, and related groups. Okay. So it's regarded as the cause of increased incarceration rates, especially for people of color. This impedes our physical quest for freedom when we're locked up. The same thing that happened after the Emancipation Proclamation with our slave codes is what's happening today. It just has another name. And I'm sure you guys have heard of the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. If you have not read it, you're doing yourself a disservice. It is an amazing, amazing book. Let me just give you a couple of key things. I mentioned early The Color of Justice, the radical racial and ethnic disparity in state prisons by Ashley Nellis. Here's some facts. This was on October 13th, 2021. Black Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. Nationally, 1 in 81 black adults in the U.S. is serving time in state prison. Now, Wisconsin leads the nation in black imprisonment rates. 1 in every 36 Wisconsinites is in prison, or black Wisconsinites is in prison. In 12 states, more than half the prison population is black. Alabama, Delaware, Georgia, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Mississippi, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. 7 states maintain a black-white disparity larger than 9-1. California, Connecticut, Iowa, Maine, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Wisconsin. Latinx individuals are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate that is 1.3 times the incarceration rate of whites. So ethnic disparities are highest in Massachusetts, which report an ethnic differential of 4-1. So these are some statistics in terms of the prison industrial complex. Now, let me just clarify something right here. This next slide that I'm talking about, the truth about black on black crime. You know, that's the buzzword. To dehumanize us, they make us appear as animals. We don't care. We're out here killing and shooting ourselves. Why should we care about them if they don't care about themselves? But here's the truth. According to the Criminal Justice Report, the latest one is 2018 by the FBI, black on black versus white on white. All right. In 2018, the Federal Bureau of Investigation reported that 81% of white victims were killed by white offenders, and 89% of black victims were killed by black offenders. 81 versus 89. And that's not crime. This is murder. Okay. Once again, we've been telling you for years, murder is based on proximity. But when you turn on the TV and you watch the news, I forgot what comedian talked about it. Something happens in one of our neighborhoods. They got the craziest looking nut on there with curlers in their hair with no teeth talking about I seen it, right? And that gives the narrative, once again, about black on black crime. And that narrative is what they want to push so they can continue to fill up the prison industrial complex. And they're filling up with people that look like you and me, okay? So these are FBI statistics. Get it straight. Not for crime, but for murder. Murder. 81 for white percent, 89% for blacks. Make sure you guys check out the video on YouTube. All right, now let's talk about our restriction of freedom or our quest for physical freedom. False accusations against black men, right? And we've seen this this is the oldest game, oldest play they got in history, right? It's happened all throughout the ages. Some of the most notable ones. I talked about the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street, Sarah Page and Dickie Rowland. And I'm going to tell you this real quick. Dickie Rowland was a young black teenager, went to a store in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a department store. Back in those days, the elevators had elevator operators. So what happened, according to him, was he went into the elevator, he tripped, and in order to stop himself from falling, he reached out, but he touched her arm. So once the elevator got upstairs to the next floor, she started screaming. Dickie Rowland hightailed it out of there and ran home. Now, of course, she told everybody, and then a mob of law enforcement and white men got their guns, came down into Tulsa in Greenwood, the Greenwood section, which was a 36 square block area in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they grabbed Dickie Rowland up. Now, when they took him back down to the courthouse, there was a lot of black men who were coming back from World War I who had firearms and were ready to defend, right? So what they did was they grabbed a group and they went down to the courthouse to make sure Dickie Rowland didn't get lynched, which was normal back in those days. And so as they went down there, a shot rang out. They don't know who exactly shot first, but it was a major scuffle. Black folks went home. The white folks, they had sent a mob. They were deputizing boys, teenage white 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old kids to grab arms. We're going to go down there and show these black folk what's going on. They went down and proceeded to burn down, loot, kill. They even dropped incendiary devices from airplanes on top of buildings. Okay, they were bombing us. It was the largest mass murder in the United States you never heard about. So now, in addition to Sarah Page saying that she was attacked, it was all that the white folks needed to go and take down this prosperous area in Greenwood. Okay. And I'm not going to tell you about everything they have. You can read my book or you can go and do some research, but it was very prosperous. Another incident, to add insult to injury, when all of the businesses and the homes, after they were burned down and destroyed and hundreds of people were killed, They tried to get insurance to cover the loss of their homes and businesses. To add insult to injury, the insurance company said, oh no, this was an act of violence that you black folks started, the riot. So we're not going to pay you. So now they had to rebuild from zero. And you're telling me there's no such thing as systemic racism? Now, I know insurance companies' jobs is to find a way not to pay. That's what they do. We recognize and understand that. But in this case, you know good and damn well that it wasn't the black folks' fault for the white folks coming down there acting a fool. So in terms of false accusations against black men, we got Karens all over the place. We got the Karen, Central Park Karen. We also, she was in the news recently, Carolyn Bryant Dunham, the one that falsely accused Emmett Till of, making lewd remarks. She said it was a lie. Yeah, the aftermath is a young 14-year-old brother got murdered, and there were a lot of people that were hurt. It was a spark for the civil rights movement, but I'm telling you right now, in terms of our physical quest for physical freedom, this is very serious out there right now. As a black man, black woman, or black person, driving while black, walking while black, whatever, it's definitely an issue that we have to be on point all the time. So let's move on now. We talked about our quest for physical freedom. Let's talk about our quest for mental freedom. A lot of times we don't talk about this. And what are the effects of racism on black folks? Now, one of the books that I'm going to recommend you guys get is called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. Okay. And what it's saying is it's a condition that exists as a consequence of multi-generational oppression of Africans and their descendants, resulting from centuries of chattel slavery, a form of slavery that was predicated on the belief that African Americans were inherently genetically inferior to whites. So she talks about in her book that if you don't address, or your parents or grandparents didn't address this trauma, just like say PTSD from a war vet, if they didn't address that trauma, it's actually passed down to you generationally. And she goes into great detail, and I can't even do what she talks about justice, but you can find her videos on YouTube, and you spell her last name Degruy, Joy DeGruy, Degruy. And the book is called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and it is generational. Okay. She also talks about, or we're going to talk about the stress of being black, right? So it says the unique psychosocial and contextual factors, specifically the common and pervasive exposure to racism and discrimination, create additional daily stressors for African Americans. Okay, due to a wide array of factors such as stereotypes, stereotype threats, and the invisibility syndrome. So do you feel that you're mentally free right now from the effects of racism? I doubt it, right? And there's many experiences. I'm going to tell you about one experience real quick. Just a simple experience I had that I was telling a couple of white folks about at this party, and they had no idea. One night, it was one evening, my wife and I were out to dinner, and this restaurant actually had a banquet facility downstairs. Now, they didn't have any banquets going on, and their bathrooms were downstairs. So I told my wife, hey, babe, I'm about to shoot downstairs to the bathroom. So I walk around the corner, I go downstairs. About 30 feet in front of me was an older white lady in her late 60s. Now, downstairs, the bathrooms are way in the back. So there's a big wide hallway, and literally she and I were the only two people there. So the first thing that came to mind for me was, okay, I have to be cognizant. I don't want her to think that I am a threat, that I might mug her or attack her. So I said, let me slow my gait, my pace down so I don't pass her, so she doesn't think I'm trying to physically harm her. Because what would happen if an old white lady starts hollering and screaming, even if I didn't do anything, I probably would have got at the least roughed up, maybe even arrested, and at the worst case scenario killed. And when I told this to a group of white folks, they were like, what? It's like, yeah, this is stuff that you don't have to worry about. So the mental stress of being black takes years off your life. Man, I'm not just saying that to be funny, but it's real talk. So the stress of being black, driving while black. How many of you, especially brothers, have gotten pulled over driving while black for no reason? I've had Philly cops pull me over, Jersey cops. I've had cops pull me over and tell me that I'm going to write up a false report because I stopped you for no reason. And they were going to make something. One cop said, yeah, who you think the judge is going to believe? I'm going to tell him you were speeding. I literally pulled out a parking space, hit the block, turned the corner of my block, and a cop pulled up behind me and wanted to search my car for no reason whatsoever. So the stress, guys, of being black. And we're talking about right now the quest for mental freedom. All right. So let's talk about stats on black mental stress. All right. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Minority Health, adult blacks are 20% more likely to report serious psychological distress more than white adults. Next, adult blacks living below poverty are 2 to 3 times more likely to report serious psychological distress than those living above poverty. Adult blacks are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness than adult whites. So we know it's a stress to being black. Let me move on now to economic freedom. Now, the quest for economic freedom. So today we're going to talk about the status of what slavery was, the landscape of blacks after slavery, what we had to deal with, the quest for physical freedom. We talked about the quest for mental freedom. Now we're going to talk about the quest for economic freedom. I have a T-shirt, one of my favorite T-shirts that I created called "There's No Revolution Without Economics." So black economic power, that's what Black Entrepreneur Blueprint is all about. Building and supporting black-owned businesses and being able to create an economic power base in the worldwide black community by doing so. So that is the importance of black economics. Now, you got to remember, economics controls politics, media, education, healthcare, and amongst other things. So if your money ain't right, it's going to be tough to get our situation where we need it to be. I'm going to talk real quickly about, and we're almost done, guys, about the racial wealth gap. And that refers to the disparity in assets of typical households across race and ethnicity. So let's look at some examples. Some examples of historical barriers for the racial wealth gap for black Americans: exclusions from building wealth via the Homestead Act, the Social Security Act of 1935, the GI Bill of 44, redlining, and discrimination in the criminal justice system. So let's talk about the Homestead Act of 1862. Homestead Act of 1862 excluded blacks prior to emancipation. So what happened? More than 160 million acres of public land, or nearly 10% of the United States, was given away for free to 1.6 million homesteaders. However, until the United States abolished slavery in 1865 and the passage of the 14th Amendment in 1868, enslaved and free blacks could not benefit from these acts. So the Homestead Act of 1862. So we couldn't get the land, right? Everybody else could run out there and grab all these acres. We never even got our 40 acres and a mule. So this is the reason why there's a racial wealth gap. Social Security Act of 1935, racism within the government that's supposed to be for the people, by the people. It excludes blacks from financial benefits. So the Social Security Act of 1935 excluded from coverage about half the workers in the American economy. Among the excluded groups were agriculture and domestic workers, a large percentage of whom were blacks. All right. Agriculture, sharecroppers. Domestic workers, people that worked as servants and maids in homes. So the Social Security Act, by the government, they excluded you. That's why you're behind financially. The GI Bill in 1944 excludes black veterans from guaranteed loans. They put their lives on the line for a country that didn't even care about them. And what happened is So the GI Bill lifted a generation into middle class, but excluded black vets who served their country at war and came home to segregation. During the drafting of the law, listen to this, the chairman of the White House Veterans Committee, Mississippi Congressman John Rankin, you know Mississippi, you know where he's at, played hardball and insisted that the program be administered by individual states instead of the federal government. That's why you always hear the Republicans and the white racists talk about states' rights, because they want to go back to slavery, just like Trump, right? So the post-war housing boom almost entirely excluded black Americans, most of whom remained in cities that received less and less investment from businesses and banks. So where's most people's money coming from? Their wealth, their home. So what happens when you can't get GI Bill loans just like the white folks? You lag, and there's a racial wealth gap in home ownership. Now, here's some studies on home ownership. Talks about, when was this? This was last year. 2022. Home ownership percentage of white people, 72%, black, 44%, Latino, 50%, Asian, 62%. Mortgage denial, percentage of people that get denied for mortgages. White folks get denied 11%, black people 20%, Latino 15%, Asian 10%. Stock ownership, 57% of white people own stock, 30% of black people, 27% of Latino, and I couldn't get the data on the Asians. In terms of amount invested, average amount for white folks invested is $230,000, black people 17,000, Latinos 30,000. Student loan debt. Right? 70% of white folks have debt. 85% of black student loans have debt. Well, black people have student loan debt. 66% Latino, 16% Asian. And of course, our student loan amount is higher than anybody else. Net worth. This is crazy. So it's hard to significantly improve the lives of black folks if you don't have no money, right? You got to have that paper. So the net worth in dollars, white folks are $875,000, black 126, Latino 166,000, Asian 156,000. Now, listen to this. Percentages of households with a negative net worth. Negative, meaning below zero. 15% of white, 40% of black households have a negative net worth, and 30% of Latinos have a negative net worth, household net worth. That's crazy. 40%. Yo, we got to do something. And it's all based on us, guys. We got to work together, spend with our own companies, build our own businesses, and we can start digging out. Black consumer spending by 2024, we're going to be at 1.8 trillion in terms of the money that comes through black hands. Black consumer buying power is projected to be 1.8 trillion by 2024. Black households annually spend an average of $36,000, which is 79% of their pre-tax income. In 2019, black households spent $835 billion on consumer goods. That's y'all out here spending money for these designers that don't give a damn about you. Saving up money so you can buy Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Louboutins, all of this nonsense, and your electric bill's about to get shut down. That's that dumb stuff. Don't even get me started on that. Where the black designers that you can support? Is their product better than ours? No. All right, so don't get me started. 11% of black females and 13% males prefer to buy luxury or designer brand clothes. Once again, you making their last name rich. They don't give a damn about you, but you going to go your last. I seen some nut buying a $10,000 pair of shorts walking around the store. You saw Jim Jones and Gucci getting mad because they wasn't giving him the service. Obviously, they don't want your business, but you crying to give this man your money or give this store your money. You're crying over that. That don't make a damn bit of sense. Anyway, like I said, don't get me started. Now, last thing I want to talk about real quick about quest for economic freedom is the circulation of the dollar. I say this and talk about it all the time on the show. So white dollar circulates 17 days. Black dollar, 6 hours. Latino dollar, 48 hours. Asian dollar, 28 days. Jewish dollar, 19 days. 6 hours. 6 hours, fam. That's what we do. We get it, and it's burning a hole in our pocket. And we don't even have the consciousness to say, let me see if I can find a black business I can support. Soon as we get it, I'm going out here buying this, that, and the other thing. And it's going to take a conscious effort for us to close that racial wealth gap. Less than 2 cents of every dollar that you spend goes to a black-owned business. Those are the statistics. 2 cents out of 100 cents. Less than, actually. It's not even quite 2 cents. That's because we're not being conscious. Oh, the new J's came out. I got to get that. Oh, I got to get this Gucci purse. I got to get these red bottoms. Man, you buy that when you're fiscally straight, right? Not when you're struggling and your car's about to get repoed or you can't pay your light bill. That's the dumb stuff or ignorant stuff that a lot of us fall the trap into because we see this stuff on media and TV, on the gram, all of this stuff. People over here acting like they got something when they really don't. You should be more concerned about what you really have than what you're projecting. You know, when I almost lost it all the second time, I told my wife, do you want to fake it and pretend we look good, or are we going to deal with the situation as is? We got to rebuild from scratch. We got to rise from the ashes like the phoenix. You know, I was making a comeback and one of my boys, and I was doing well at the time, but I'm not a big car guy. I'm going to buy a nice car and I'm going to keep it for 10 years. One of my boys was like, yo, you rolling, man. Why are you driving this? I said, I got 2 kids in college and I'm trying to regroup. Now, I could have bought something real nice, but I didn't need to because I didn't have to prove anything to anybody else. And my whole saying is, if you ain't paying my bills, then you ain't got nothing to say to me. So I'm going to build and spend my money for the things that I think make sense. Assets, not buying garbage and nonsense that's going to keep us, on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to the racial wealth gap. Now, this is pretty much the end of my presentation. But before I close on out, guys, let me give you all my social media contact information and resource links. The best thing to do, everything I'm going to tell you, is on my website, blackentrepreneurblueprint.com. So I mentioned at the top of the show, my new book is out, Unlocking the Power of ChatGPT, the ultimate prompting handbook for beginners. Y'all better get on this AI thing. Go to unlockingchatgpt.com. Also, I mentioned BEB Academy, which is an online learning portal. Go to the website, blackentrepreneurblueprint.com. It's on the first page of the website. Also, anybody that's interested in e-commerce business, building a physical products brand or digital products brand, my pound for pound, one of my best programs is Brand Builder Academy Elite, bbaelite.com, where you can go to the website. It's on the top of the page, blackentrepreneurblueprint.com. And my last program, which is probably my most impactful, is Pinpoint and Monetize Your Genius. Now, your genius, guys, is the intersection of your passion and your talent. Problem is most people can't monetize it. So if you're interested in taking your God-given abilities, your talents, and your passions and monetizing it, check out the program Pinpoint and Monetize Your Genius, which is also on the front page of my website, blackentrepreneurblueprint.com. Now, if you want to connect with me, guys, anything long, hit me on my email, jayjones@blackentrepreneurblueprint.com. JAYJONES @blackentrepreneurblueprint.com. Facebook, Black Entrepreneur Blueprint. Twitter, jjones001. That's JAYJONES001. Instagram, I got 2 IG accounts. The first one is jjones for real, JAYJONES, the number 4, REAL. J Jones for real. The second one is Black Entrepreneur Blueprint. Connect with me also, guys, on LinkedIn. Just type in J Jones, Black Entrepreneur Blueprint. Connect with me there. And don't forget YouTube. We have additional content on YouTube that we don't have on the actual podcast. So if you're watching this, subscribe. If you're watching it on YouTube, if you're not, make sure you go to YouTube, type in Black Entrepreneur Blueprint and hit the subscribe button. And that way, Anytime a new episode or anything comes out on YouTube, you'll be alerted. Now, for the first time listeners, BEB or Black Entrepreneur Blueprint comes out every Monday morning, 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on all your major podcast platforms and YouTube. So wherever you're watching this, make sure you subscribe so you can get this new heat every Monday morning. We've been rocking for damn near 10 years now. We're on episode 470. And like I said, this is something that's passionate. It's something that's needed. And the whole mission, guys, is to build up our economy or build up our community by building and supporting Black-owned businesses. Now, let me get back to the show real quick. I just wanted to say, I always make a point, especially now, I want to do impactful things. I want to do things that are going to help our community, help elevate our entrepreneur IQ, because that's my space, is entrepreneurship and economics. When you come here, you're not talking about gamesmanship. You're not talking about all this nonsense. We're getting straight to the point, right? And what I speak about are things that I've done, not things that I think about or theories. So I want to talk to you from a level of expertise. And the people that I bring on the show, those people have an expertise in certain things. So I joke around and say, I'm not a guru, I'm a duru, because everything I talk about, I have done or am doing. So one of the things that I want you guys to understand, the whole platform is designed not for me, it's designed for us. So anybody that I bring on the platform, any episode that I create, I try to give you actionable steps to take you from point A to B. And today's show is a little bit different. We're celebrating Juneteenth, but we're talking about beyond the date, understanding Juneteenth's impact on the ongoing quest for freedom. So we're still in this struggle. We're still fighting, guys, for physical freedom, mental freedom, and economic freedom. And the only way we're going to get out of it is by pulling together, galvanizing, and working consistently together, not focusing and fighting. You know, we want to support each other's products, each other's brands, each other's businesses. Okay. And one of the things that I want you guys to do is stop giving or making a Black business have to reach certain levels that you don't make white businesses have to reach. So if you go to a Black rib joint and they open 10 minutes late, you online complaining. You go to the Asian corner store and they open 10 minutes late, that's okay. All right. Stop putting different levels of accountability on Black businesses that you don't put on other businesses. Okay. And I'm going to close with this. Struggle is a never ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. So it doesn't matter what our fathers, mothers, grandfathers, grandmothers, all our ancestors did back then. It's a daily struggle today. And the way that we have to continue to move forward, guys, is by galvanizing. Remember, it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about us. It's about building an economic power base in the worldwide Black community by building and supporting Black-owned businesses. Love you guys. See you same time next week. Peace.